Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to the Divine Union podcast. And I'm really excited because today is episode 4 of our 4-part desire series. And so far, what we covered in these past 3 weeks was first the energetics of desire and understanding that balance of space and togetherness for creating attraction and sustaining attraction. And for the second episode 128, we talked about how to shift from this energy of wanting, needing, seeking to creating an energy of offering and of invitation, and how that subtle shift of energetics impacts passion, impacts desire to help you feel like your relationship feels more alive and less from a place of dependency. In our third episode, we talked about the balance of fire and air and how to sustain desire without losing the heat and really understanding polarity energetics and what creates passion, what creates polarity, with different ways to bring in more spaciousness into the relationship. And so today we're going even deeper to close with this fourth episode. And we're talking about this dance between either being too close or too far, and understanding that sweet spot and understanding some of the psychological elements and behavioral elements that are impacted from early childhood that impact our desire for closeness or distance, so that you can then take that and then work with that, implementing everything that you've learned from the episodes prior. So I'm really excited because our childhood dynamics often impact how we show up if we seek closer proximity and partnership, if we don't enjoy taking space, are afraid to take space, or if you skew more the other way where you need that spaciousness to feel a greater sense of desire. And I'm excited to dig into this because when we understand these patterns, it's easier to unwind them and break them down. And so let's go with if you are more on the line where you fear space and closeness, you don't often allow yourself to take space. What can happen in childhood that impacts that is, if you, and this happens in many families, and so again, we don't want to blame our primary caregivers. They did the best they could as we were aging and growing up. But oftentimes, a dynamic that can happen is as a child starts to establish their sense of independence, their sense of sovereignty. So maybe you're defying your parents' rules as a young kid, right? That no, I want to do things my way, or maybe you want to dress yourself in your own way, and your parents kind of force their opinions onto you. Or perhaps you didn't have a lot of freedom of expression. What can happen as a child is you start to fear that separateness, because that separateness as a child, maybe your parents unconsciously shamed you for it, made you feel wrong for it, got angry when you had your own opinions, you defied their rules. And so you learn as a coping strategy as a child that in order to please parents, I need to be the one with them. I need to have the same opinions as them. I need to be the same. I need to not challenge. And this creates this dynamic. This bleeds into romantic relationship because our romantic relationships mirror our childhood dynamics. And so it can create a dynamic then where in relationship, you don't fully express your own independent thought, or you don't go against the opinions of partner, or maybe, you shove it down, but then maybe you explode down the road when it's been too much. So it doesn't have to be just one way, but it's noticing if you see that behavior within. Now, another dynamic can be maybe you were with a parent that needed a lot of your attention and energy. Maybe you were constantly having to cater to your parent. Maybe your parent was depressed when you were growing up as a child. And so you always felt like you needed to be there to give that love and support for parent. And so much so, in fact, that you didn't allow yourself to take space to work on catering to your own needs, your own inner world. And so you've learned that space can be dangerous because if I take space, parent might not be okay. Now, a slightly less mm, dramatic or less maybe um, intense response can be if you had parents that always wanted to be engaged, constantly asking you questions, constantly talking. Maybe they asked you a lot of questions so that they didn't have to share about their own lives, not intentionally. So maybe you were used to always having to be engaged because it's very hard as a child to say to parent who talks a lot or wants to talk a lot, because maybe parent isn't able to be in silence, to then say, hey, mom, dad, I prefer silence. I don't want to always be engaged, right? When you're a child and you're dependent, it's very difficult to do that because that can anger the parent and it can cause abandonment in some ways. And so, if that is something that you grew up with, it may bleed if you look at that pattern. If that's a pattern you notice, and if you notice that's something that happens in your relationship where you fear taking space because you fear that it will cause disconnection, or that slowly you'll lose the connection that you have by taking space, or that it may anger partner, frustrate partner. It's knowing that, and this is why I'm sharing all these examples, because then it's tracing that back to where that comes from. Because in a healthy relationship, and when we age, as we're all adults that are self sufficient, we got to reprogram that and know a healthy relationship, I should be able to communicate my needs for space. I should be able to take space and the connection will stay strong. And I should be able to cultivate my own individual expression. So this means doing the things that fill us up, the yoga, the meditation, the time with friends, not sacrificing that for partner, and knowing that that will actually keep the connection will stay strong. And in fact, it'll be stronger as a result. And it takes time to rewire that. And it's remembering also that you are a different person now. So the communication tools, you have more access to healthy communication as we age versus as you're a young child, it's harder to communicate because we're all learning and we're forming our brains and our voice and our expression. And so usually over time, you come deeper into yourself. And as you do the work, this is why also in my work, I do work with voice and communication because communication is a very powerful tool to empower us in our relationships to communicate in ways that give us the desired result or have it so we're more likely to get the result that we desire. Another, and this can go in two different ways. If you grew up with parents that were overbearing and constantly in your space where you didn't feel like you had a sense of self, and maybe boundaries were blurred, emotional boundaries or physical boundaries, you can go one of two ways. You can go in that same route of also not honoring your own boundaries and giving up your own boundaries at the expense for partners. So not really taking that space, that air that's needed in relationship. Or if parent was overbearing and constantly in your space, you may go the other way of you may need a lot of distance. You may feel constantly like your boundaries are being violated. And when you do, you take even more space in relationship because that's your way of um, maintaining your sense of self in a dynamic where you feel invaded upon with your boundaries. And having awareness of this side and where it comes from, then it's starting to give affirmations to self around reminding yourself of what attracts you to someone to begin with is when you see someone in their own independent expression. You get to see your partner in their glory, in their uniqueness, with all of their interests and their passions. And when you see them following that, that is attractive. And so it's remembering and rewiring no, what's actually attractive in a healthy, secure relationship is when I'm my best, when I'm doing the things that fill me up, or I'm cultivating my passions, and you're continuously um, stay interesting because you're continuously growing and developing, and that naturally makes us feel alive. So if we swing on the other end of the spectrum, if actually before I do that, I will say a tool for that is making sure checking in throughout the day. If you live with partner and you're together pretty much every day, you work together in the same space, allowing yourself to go out for a walk, like take space for 30 to an hour, 30 minutes to an hour every day. Or maybe it's you go for your walk in the day by yourself to reflect. And we want to be mindful when you do that, if you're taking space and that's your only time to take space, to not have music, maybe a podcast, you can, but to also have time where you are in reflection and have spaciousness. Because if you're always filling it with a podcast or music or a show, what can happen is you don't have that time and space to reflect on the relationship. And that's important. And having solo time, idle time, where you can just reflect on the week, the month, the year as a coupledom, maybe a conflict that happened. Let your mind think about it. It gives you space to have insights, have reflection, have things to share. And then also doing things like your podcast and your music and things that fill you up so that you feel nourished inside. So that can be one example, taking 30 minutes to an hour every day to do something you enjoy and having some of it be idle time. It can also be finding times when you're together to be in the silence and finding ways that you can be in the silence together without having to communicate. But maybe one partner's reading, one's on the computer, maybe one's cooking, one's sitting on the computer, and trying to keep for that set amount of time that you agree on a time boundary of, for this time, we're not going to communicate. Maybe you can make eye contact here and there, but we're not going to actually speak. Because sometimes what can happen in relationship, what I see happening, and it even happens to me as I work in a public space as well, so as I do, when I do, is sometimes people, if I'm co-working, like people who know you, your friends, your partner, they might think you're open to have a conversation, and they might not honor that or understand that boundary of just because I'm in the same room as you doesn't mean I'm ready to talk. Doesn't mean I want to talk in this moment. And so having a set time block of time where you're in the same space, but you're not communicating, and establishing a boundary in a loving way around that is going to create more safety for both partners. And it's going to allow both partners to have that time and space when they're together. Now, if you skew the other way and you need more time and space, first, it's also knowing when you think about childhood, that example of if parents intruded in your boundaries and you went the other way, and the only way for you to feel safe or have your own sense of control was by controlling your inner world, then you may go that direction of you need a lot of space. You often maybe feel like your partner intrudes upon you, even when it may not seem like they are to them. And so acknowledging that and acknowledging with self, a practice to remember for you, if this is you, is I can always assert a boundary at any moment. I don't need to do it preemptively. I don't need to do it before there's been a breach. And knowing that you can use your voice, because maybe unlike in childhood, maybe in childhood you were shamed for it or you constantly felt prodded upon. But as you age now, as a sovereign being, I can assert a boundary in any moment. So I don't need to defend my boundaries so hard. I don't need to protect them so hard. In a moment that something's breached, I can assert the boundary with the voice, with love, and it'll be honored. And I trust it'll be honored. And if it's not, I use my voice and I communicate about it. And so it's knowing that in any moment you can access that. Also, if your parents as a child maybe weren't around a lot and you had a lot of alone time, you're used to a lot of alone time. So then it's a matter of, okay, communicating to partner. I need a lot of time because I had a lot of time as a child. I was alone a lot. And so I enjoy that. I need that time and space. And then it's communicating with partner. If maybe you're in the same space and they're talking too much and you want more silence, it's communicating. I enjoy, and I feel connected when we're together and in silence. And I'd like more of those moments. I'd like more moments of spaciousness in the conversation. Uh, Pauses before one of us responds. I don't always like when we fill the pause with words because it makes me feel like I can't think and reflect. And I like to have time to think and reflect. And so, again, it's using the communication, the voice, to express what it is you desire. And then it's also, if you skew more towards the independent side, it's also acknowledging, okay, healthy relationships have a little more perhaps interaction or communication than is comfortable, depending where you are in the spectrum. Yeah. But if you feel that and this feels true, then it's saying, okay, how can I find ways to practice being in connection and then being separate? So allowing yourself as well, because often if you skew way in the independent realm, you may fear having to take space. So you may completely avoid connection, times of connection, because of the discomfort of having to separate. And so it's allowing you, and this is actually good for both parties, to give yourself that time where you practice connecting and separating. Connecting and then feeling into your body, feeling into your heart, your mind. What do you want? Do I want to go take 10 minutes to take a nap? Am I not enjoying the show anymore when partner is? And I'm going to disconnect from the show. Am I going to go do an exercise routine for 20 minutes? And it's making time and in kind of forcing self to practice separating and coming back together. And you can talk about when you're going to come back together, or you can leave it up in the air and see how you feel and still maintain communication in whatever way feels good. And the more as a couple that you can both toggle into this togetherness and separateness, the more actually both parties are going to feel fulfilled. And so it's really just about breaking that pattern pending childhood of either seeking excess closeness or seeking excess independence and separateness. It's been such a pleasure. This 4-part series has been so fun for me. And thank you to all of those of you who have given me such amazing feedback, because this has helped tailor the episodes to what's needed, to what's alive. And I always love working with live feedback on the fly. So thank you. And share this episode with someone whom you feel would resonate or benefit or gain value from these topics, because this helps us spread the mission of bringing more intimacy to this world, deeper awareness, deeper perspective of the mirrors that we all are, and bridging the gap between the masculine and feminine and between all of humanity. I look forward to seeing you next week. And until then, may all your unions be divine.